Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's lesson. We are going to go through the 2015 History O-Level essay questions. And I hope to recap on how to answer the history paper, especially when we're looking at the 8 marks and 12 marks rubrics. Now, for an 8 marks question, this is the different steps that you need to take. Now, if you look very carefully, even a simple description will actually get you the 1 to 2 marks. That means you just describe anything that you know, that comes to your mind, anything. So the idea here is not to just leave the question blank. As long as you're able to describe something, and then later we look at the sample. What is the meaning of describing? Now, in an 8-mark question, you are supposed to give 2 factors, if possible. All right. Now, if you are able to just identify the factors or describe the factors, you would already have gotten the 4 marks. Okay, so this is literally about recalling, okay, or literally just recap of the important points. Now, you need to aim for an 8-mark question is you need to get at least a 7 to 8 marks, because this would be the easier part of writing the essay. Okay, and when we talk about explaining, when we say explain, there must be a very clear method of writing. So some of you are very familiar with Peel. Okay, point examples, explain the examples and the link, or some of you will be quite familiar with the what, how, and why. Okay, now as long as you have a main point, as long as you have examples, as long as you have like a link, okay, that would actually be an explanation. So the link is to actually use the examples to answer the question. Okay, now moving on, a 12-mark question would demand definitely slightly more. All right, it is again a statement. So for B question or 12-mark question, it is what we call a statement, and you have to answer in 2 paragraphs minus the conclusion, but it is 2 paragraphs. So you have a paragraph 1 and you have a paragraph 2. Okay, and usually it is a yes no. Most of the time there is a statement that you have to agree as well as disagree. Okay, and you would have gotten 10 marks already. Now, for you to get 11 to 12 marks is actually to argue your way or to decide what we call a balanced conclusion. A balanced conclusion would actually mean, for example, do you agree more or would you disagree more? Or maybe, just maybe, for that particular history question, it is actually both sides. There is no clear, definite answer. That means you can actually say that, oh, I agree and I disagree, and I feel that it is both factors are the one that actually sort of play a part. All right. Very rare for you to sit at the fence, but it is possible. Okay. Now, this is the 2015 O-Level paper. There's a very interesting video that I've put in the link there, and it is from Historycom. And one of the things about Cold War is they can actually ask you questions on the origins or the beginning of Cold War, and they can ask you about events or what I call manifestations of Cold War. And they can ask you very specific events, okay, like Korean War, like Berlin blockade, and what we are doing today, actually, a Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, so every time, take note, decide on what kind of questions you have revised, and do the best. Choose the best question, actually. Okay. Now, Marshall Plan paragraph 1 because the question was explain why Marshall Plan was actually introduced. Okay, now always recap. If you are stuck somewhere, always start with definition. So if you are stuck in the exam, always start with definition. At least, worst come to worst, you would have gotten that 1 mark, 1 to 2 marks perhaps. Okay, always start with definition. Now, as part of Marshall Plan was part of a containment policy. If you remember what is containment policy, okay, it is to stop the spread of communism. All right, and Marshall Plan was introduced because it has been seen and proven that after World War II, if countries continue to live in poverty, it is usually they are usually very attracted to command economy. Command economy here literally means Soviet-run economy, or how the economy in Soviet Union is actually conducted. All right, where state control a lot of things. Okay, and the idea here is for USA or democratic countries to stop communists from spreading. You need countries to rebuild. You need a lot of countries, and especially in Europe, to rebuild. And the idea of Marshall Plan, so this is the explanation here. Okay, this is the explanation or the link. The idea is Marshall Plan was to ensure that there was actually stronger countries or stronger governments in Europe, so that when you offer them money, okay, they will not be attracted to communists. And when they are not attracted to communists, it actually helps countries to recover quickly. And when they recover, definitely they do not want to go back to being communism. All right. Now, the second paragraph, you continue. Okay, so another reason why Marshall Plan was also introduced was also because, you know, why would USA actually spend billions of taxpayers' money? Now, we're talking literally about taxpayers' money. Okay, where did USA get all the money? Okay, it is literally taxpayers' money, government's money that is supposed to be channeled to Americans, but they are giving up this money, okay, and giving it to European countries because they realize that, you know, you need to invest in these countries first so that in the future, USA is able to get these economic gains. Okay, now with the money, countries in Europe will be able to quickly reconstruct their own countries, their own economy, and when they are richer, they are able to demand goods and more products. And where do you think these goods and product will come from? Naturally, USA. Okay, because most possibly they are one of the countries that is the least affected during World War II. And if USA was able to sell their manufactured goods, it really means it is very helpful for both USA as well as European countries. Okay, so it is what we call a very mutual benefit. I know some of you would think that, oh, it is actually taking advantage of Europe. Well, it is a mutual benefit. I make sure that you recover, and your relationship with me, that means European countries' relationship with USA, gets really strong. And that is why there is this great collaboration between these countries, as well as great, I guess, respect for each other. All right. If you are a cynic, then you feel that, oh, okay, USA is quite manipulative. You don't give money, but demand something else. So it is up to whose perspective we are looking at. All right. And through the Marshall Plan, USA aimed to benefit from the prosperity of European countries. And especially what we see here, it is the economic gain as they recover from World War II. Okay. Now, moving on, were there other reasons for the Marshall Plan? Of course, there were other reasons, and one of the main reasons is definitely a show off, I would say. The very fact that Marshall Plan was actually very successful, and a lot of the countries in Europe, especially Western Europe, okay, we're not talking about like Eastern Europe, we're not talking about communist country, we're not talking about Soviet Union. They were not as successful, and they were very envious about the success of maybe West Germany at that time and a lot of European countries. Okay, and it is to actually sort of show off and to get then the communist countries or countries that actually accepted communists to fight for democracy, to fight for democracy and to cause dissatisfaction in communist countries themselves. So it is like is to bait other communist countries to stop being communist and join the European countries who actually benefit from Marshall Plan. So this is an example of an 8-mark question, very easy. It doesn't require so much, but what it requires is for you to really understand the content. Now, what if, let's say, in the O-level, you cannot remember Marshall Plan? Then my advice is do not do a question. You must be very confident with the 8-mark question rather than just make sure that, oh, I can do the 12-mark question, but I have no idea of the 8-mark question. You should always choose where you could actually do both. I think that will be even more beneficial. Now, moving on. Okay, this is the B question, and if you have forgotten how Khrushchev looks like, this is how Khrushchev looks like. Okay, now Khrushchev's decision to put nuclear missiles on Cuba was an error in his judgment. So this is basically, like what I said, it is a statement. You can see that you have a statement here, and they ask you how far. Now, every time you see the word how far, it is definitely two-sided. That means it is yes, the decision was an error, or it could be no, the decision was not an error. Okay, so you have such a paragraph. It's 3 paragraphs in total. Okay, and in each paragraph, you need at least to give 2 examples, or if you have time, as many examples as you can. And when I say examples, it cannot be just a one-liner. All right, it has to be very concrete examples, well explained, and then you make that statement, that linking back. All right, now let's go to the first one. I decided to start with I disagree with the statement because I wanted to show, or I have more examples. So you decide in the national exam, given that short duration of perhaps 30 minutes to write an essay, which paragraph you are going to write first. So if your disagree has more examples, you write that paragraph first. All right. Now, due to Khrushchev's decision, relationships with USA improved tremendously. It did improve. They signed a lot of agreements to stop nuclear war. Okay. And besides that, there was actually more conversations, all right, between USA as well as USSR. Okay, there was actually a lot of talk between the two countries. Okay, Cuba remained communist. There was no major sort of what do you call that, major USA trying to reconquer Cuba again. I mean, Cuba is relatively free from that, despite not having the nuclear missiles in Cuba itself. Okay, now moving on. Of course, Khrushchev's hidden agenda was fulfilled. There was a removal of missiles from Italy and Europe. I think that was one of the things that I guess Khrushchev was very successful about. And of course, at the last part, there is an avoidance of nuclear war. Okay, moving on, you can actually then go to the next paragraph. Okay, so I agree with the statement that Khrushchev's decision was actually bad or was actually an error. And in your textbook itself, there were only 2 examples that you sort of can quote for this particular question. Okay, and one of it would definitely be because of what Khrushchev decided. And what was Khrushchev's decision? Khrushchev's decision was to remove nuclear missiles. Okay, remove the nuclear missiles in Cuba itself. So you can roughly guess that this is going to get him into trouble, I guess. You know, that is why he was always trying to justify his actions, why he needed to remove these nuclear missiles. And due to Khrushchev's decision, it actually worsened the relationship with another country, which was actually China. Now, China was, if you remember, China was a very good supporter of Soviet Union during the Korean War, and their relationship was pretty close. Now, because, and remember, Korean War is actually in 1950 all the way to 1953. All right. So the relationship there was actually very good, but the problem is because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, China felt that Soviet was actually being very weak. Okay, and Soviet, by negotiating with USA, literally was actually going against communist ideals. I guess communists in China, I would say, is a bit more hardcore in comparison, because they felt that this was the only time when you could actually threaten USA. And USA being a country that has a lot more capacity, they had a lot more nuclear power. It was quite impossible to threaten them. But having missiles in Cuba sort of gave them that upper hand. And Khrushchev initially had the upper hand, but with negotiation with Kennedy, there was no more upper hand. All right. So, and because of that, I guess communism itself was kind of weak, because both China as well as Soviet Union, they couldn't come to a compromise, and China sort of broke free from the Soviet Union brand of communism, and they claimed to be what we call the true leader of communism, and that was their ideal. They went ahead, of course, also to support Vietnam in the Vietnam War. Okay, even though it's not in syllabus, but it's also good to just to know. All right, now moving on, Khrushchev unfortunately fell into power. He was removed from his position, and he was actually put under house arrest until his death. So these were the negative impact of removing the missiles from Cuba itself. How about the relationship with Castro? Of course, I think if you remove something, the relationship with Castro was also what I call quite strained. Okay. Now, moving on, there are these two videos that I thought would be very good for you to actually watch them. Now, conclusion, as I was saying, conclusion requires you to actually balance things. Okay. Now, how far? So, how far do you think that Khrushchev's decision was an error? Now, the very fact that he was removed from power, it does tell you that, oh, his error, it was a big error, correct? And the very fact that he literally made a mistake to the extent that he got removed. So obviously, Khrushchev's decision to even start by bringing missiles in Cuba and actually taking them back and negotiating with Kennedy, USA. So it was an error right from the beginning. Or you could argue from the very fact that, well, actually, what he did was he actually was able to negotiate with USA, and the missiles that was pointing to Soviet Union, the missiles from Italy as well as Turkey, was actually removed. Hence, the threat to Soviet Union motherland was lessened. So it is how you argue your way. There is no right and wrong, but it is really a balanced conclusion if it's possible. Now, again, I remind you, a conclusion is just 2 marks. You have to be very careful. You have to decide whether this 2 marks is worth the effort in you writing. Most of the time, I would advise my students to actually just stop at 10 marks, don't write conclusion, move on, finish out your source-based questions. I think that would be more important. Come back if you have more time. Okay, so this is just a quick summary of the 2015 history O-level paper. Thank you.